Welcome back to my channel. I am the fabled librarian. Some of you might remember me, but I haven't been posting a lot lately because I've had a lot going on, but I'm going to try to be better. You see, I went in a different direction today. I didn't fully have a mask, but I still wanted to have a little bit on my face. So I went with the jewels. Not a full mask. I might change it because frankly, I'm not very good at makeup. You might be able to tell. I'm not very good at it. I was trying to do some like intricate eye makeup, but it didn't pan out, and then I had to wipe it all off. It went very badly. But it's something I need to work on and practice, so we'll get to it. But anyway, today I'm going to go into Greek mythology because I like mythology. It's one of my favorite things. But this is kind of a combination of, Greek and Roman, I feel like. I don't know. Because it's about it's about an apple. As some of you may know, the apple that caused the Trojan War. Yeah, that's what we're going with. The golden apple that caused a war. And oh man, I've always wanted to name a pet or something after Eris, the goddess of discord. And I've never found the right opportunity to do it. You don't want to give the wrong pet that name, because what if the pet ends up being problematic because of the name they're given? You just never know. So today we are going to be talking about that golden apple that caused the Trojan War, and then eventually we're going to be talking about the Trojan War, but probably not in this video. But one of the reasons I loved this myth in general was because I learned about it in Latin class. So we actually had to write a book. We had to make a book. It says Eris, which is angry Eris. I don't really like to show the pictures too much, but you can see the snake. The snake is associated with the Eris. So I'm gonna try to read the Latin because this was written in Latin, and I kind of made pictures and stuff, but I don't really want to show the pictures too much. So olim peleos et thetis matrimonium designaverant. Magnos amicos el militis vocaverant. Deam eram non vacant, quod malam fecit. Eris erat irata. Eoram pomum in pavimentum aegit. And you guys aren't going to know what this is. You won't know unless you know Latin. And you can translate. You're not going to know until I tell you the full story as we go through it, which I am. After I finish this, we're going to go through the whole story. Dixit Pulcherrimai. That means to the most beautiful. Dea Venus Minerva et Juno pro poma pugnaverant. So pugnaverant, that means they fought. So they fought over the golden apple. So you already know some of the story now, right? Because it involves Venus, Juno, and Minerva. Peres Veneram Pulcherrimam appellavat. What did he say? Alright. So now we're going to get into the actual story. The one that's not written in Latin, so that way we all know what it is. So, no one, as far as could be found out, had invited Eris to the party. The there's always those people, not always, but sometimes, the uninvited ones, but they know what's going on because this wedding was a huge deal that was happening. That's why everybody wanted to go to this party, but nobody invited her. Everyone would have desired to keep her away, for it was a very great wedding feast attended by them both immortals and men, and Eris was the goddess of discontent. She just wanted to make everybody miserable. So it's really not someone anybody would intentionally invite. So she kind of just came. There was a beautiful nymph of the sea named Thetis, whom even Jupiter had looked upon with favor. And so he gave her in marriage to Peleus. Now he was a mortal man, but he was also in favor. The marriage was being held on Mount Olympus, and just when the merrymaking was at its height, and Ganymede, the comely Trojan youth, whom Jupiter, in the guise of an eagle, had borne away to be the cupbearer of the gods, was offering his nectar to all, a golden apple fell into their midst. Let's see. We already know who this golden apple is from, right? Because she can't be happy. She just can't be happy. It was a very large apple, and it shone and glittered as if it had been made from skin to core, from precious gold. Even the gods scrambled to grasp it because it was so beautiful and so large. And for a moment, they did not see who had thrown it. As Jupiter held up the apple, he read the inscription, "For the fairest." This actually, what does this seem like? This kind of always reminds me of the mirror from Snow White, who's the fairest of them all. Anyway, that got me a little off track. So the guests had a flying vision of Discord riding away in her dark chariot from the feast that she had chosen to make bitter. For that apple was to be the beginning of a war so long and so terrible that there had never been any equal to it throughout the centuries. And at once the goddesses began to quarrel amongst themselves because, all of these goddesses, if nothing else, most of them are what? A little vain. So they always want to be the most beautiful, the most fair of them all. Because who wouldn't be? So, they all started to fight amongst themselves, and so it took this glorious wedding feast and made it into something contentious, right? So, Juno, of course, is the queen of the gods, and demanded that the golden apple be hers, just because she was queen of the gods. But Minerva also wanted it, in addition to her treasure of wisdom, because she wanted to be seen as the most beautiful, even though she was so wise. They had appealed to the mighty Jupiter, but neither he or any of the gods dared to decide this question. And so a judge had to be found among the mortals on Earth. I mean, really, has anyone ever gotten in a fight about who's the most beautiful and who wants to say anything? Who really wants to say anything? Unless they have to. Because whose wrath do you really want to endure? Do you want to endure Juno's or Minerva's? Both could wreak havoc. Who wants to be that person? So, near the city of Troy, on a high mountain named Ida, there lived a young shepherd named Paris. No one but the gods knew the secret of Paris's royal birth. he had only been left on Mount Ida when he was a child, because it had been told to his parents in the prophecy that he would be the destruction of the kingdom and the ruin of his family. So Paris, all unknowing that he was a prince, had grown up among the flocks, as good to look upon as a young god, and greatly beloved by all who were in the woods, like the nymphs. They loved him so much. He was just, but nobody knew why he was so. They didn't know of his birth, and so they didn't know why he was the way he was. But it was decided at last that the shepherd, Paris, would be the judge, who would decide among three goddesses, the three. So they decided among Juno, Minerva, or Venus would be named the most fair. Although it's interesting because, Venus is just known for her beauty, so it's funny that they were worried about giving her that title. But Juno, she can be really difficult, and she's very powerful, so it kind of makes sense. So, anyway. So who would get this golden apple? They descended into the clouds of glory to Mount Ida and stood before him for his judgment. They seemed to have forgotten their heavenly birth in their jealousy, and for each offered the young shepherd a bribe if he would declare her the most fair. Juno offered Paris great wealth and one of the kingdoms of the earth. She offered him to be a king. I'm not sure. Would you be able to turn that down? Ooh, let's see what Minerva offers. Minerva said that she would grant Paris as her boon a share of her wisdom and invincible power in war. But Venus, her unmatched beauty dazzling the youth as the bright rays of the noontide sun, and wearing her enchanted girdle. A spell that no one had ever been able to resist, laid her hand that was as light as sea foam on Paris's fast beating heart. I will give you the loveliest woman in the world to be your wife, she said. Which one would you choose? Do you feel like you know where he's going to go with this? Do you think? What would you choose? Wealth and power, or the loveliest woman in the world? At Venus's words, Paris pronounced his judgment, which had never been forgotten through all the ages. Ringing from singer to singer and from nation to nation in the greatest strife that was started by it. He put the apple of gold into the outstretched hands of Venus, not noticing the cloud which carried the angry Juno and Minerva back to the sky. It was black as night, as what Jupiter was preparing to throw his thunderbolts. So, it doesn't seem that even Jupiter was happy with this. I wonder why. Okay, but he chose, it's interesting. Would you make the same choice as Paris? Would you choose the most loveliest woman in the world? Or would you choose wealth and money and kingdoms and power? I mean, I guess it is a hard decision, but can anything match love? Or, well, who knows if he's even going to love this person? But, he made his choice. Paris saw little after that except his own desires and ambitions, and Venus began at once feeding his vanity. She told him of his royal birth. He was the son of King Priam of Troy. So Paris set out for his father's kingdom to find his fortune in his flocks. Never saw him again. Oh, his poor flocks. I hope someone was there at least to take care of them. Just as that time King Priam declared a contest of wrestling among the princes of his court and those of the neighboring kingdoms. On his way to Troy, Paris heard of this, and he saw the prize being led toward Troy by one of the king's herdsmen. It was the finest bull to be found on all the grazing plains of Mount Ida. And Paris decided to enter the contest and see if he could not win it for himself. So Paris presented himself to the court of Troy and wrestled in the sight of the king and his brothers and sister, Cassandra, who did not know him. And he threw all his opponents, and was proclaimed the victor. He was proclaimed the victor. He was greeted with joy as King Priam recognized him and was crowned with laurel. Only Cassandra, that sorrowful princess to whom the gods had given the fatal power of seeing coming events, wept as Paris was welcomed to the throne of his father. For Cassandra saw Paris as the destruction of Troy. She saw him because the prophecy, the reason he was sent away to begin with, was because he was going to be seen as the destruction of Troy, right? And her gift of prophecy was her sadness, because she was doomed never to be believed. Nobody believed her. Nobody wants to hear that something's going to go badly. And it's really sad for her, because she knew the truth, and she was given that. She was given that wisdom of being able to see the future, and it didn't actually help anybody. That's really sad. Then Venus told Paris to demand a ship of King Priam and set sail for Sparta in Greece, that her promise to him might be fulfilled. Paris set out, a wondrous appearing youth and a glorious victor, and he was all well received by King Menelaus and his fair wife, Helen. Do you see where this is going? How many people know the story or have heard of Helen before? If Venus's beauty cast a spell among the gods, so did the loveliness of Helen blind the eyes of men to everything save her lovely face. There is a story told that Helen was the child of an enchanted swan, and that this was the reason for the enchantment which she wrought in the hearts of the heroes. All the great princes of Greece had sued for Helen's hand. They wanted her hand in marriage. They all wanted to marry her. And when she left her home to be the wife of Menelaus, her father made the heroes bind themselves by oath to go to the aid of Menelaus if should it chance that she was ever stolen away from him. Is she going to be stolen? Do you guys know this story? So, Helen's father was fearful for her peace because of the peerless gift of charm which was hers. In all of Greece, and indeed in the entire world, there was nothing so beautiful as Helen's fair face. For a long time, Paris remained in the court of Sparta, treated with courtesy and respect which he did not deserve. Because during all that time, Venus was enchanting Helen until she was able to think of no one save Paris. After a while, King Menelaus was obliged to take a long journey, and in his absence, Paris pursued Helen to forsake Sparta and set sail with him for Troy. See, Helen didn't actually want this. She was just enchanted. She was, Venus promised Paris this, and she had to make good on her promise. So when these two were discovered in their treachery, the heroes were fired with anger and remembered their pledge to King Menelaus. And they had to go to his aid to get his wife back. Their wrath was not so much directed against Helen, whom they believed to be under a dreadful spell, which Venus had cast upon her, as against Paris. Paris was the one they were angry with. And it was decided that preparations for war must be immediately begun, and men were pressed into service everywhere, gathering supplies and building ships. Agamemnon, who was the brother of King Menelaus and mighty in battle, was appointed the leader of the Greek army. And then began the work of finding the best men to help in this fight against Troy. The heroes were as true and of high courage then as they were today. But the adventure of the war was to be directed against a foreign shore, and certain of the Greeks found that it tore their hearts to leave their own country, and in the cause of a willful youth and a fair woman. I mean, who really wants to go to war over this woman and this boy? This man, I guess. But really, he was acting like a boy because he was so obsessed with this woman. He could have been given a kingdom, by one of the others. And he was just talked into the wrong thing. He took the wrong course. Among this battle, this group of men who had to go into battle, was Ulysses, the king of Ithaca. Ulysses was content and happy in his peaceful kingdom, in the love of his industrious queen Penelope, and his baby son Telemachus. We must not commit Ulysses to the sin of cowardice, because he did not want to enlist in this Trojan War. There have been heroes like him of all time, destined to be the greatest warriors when they overcome their fears and took swords in their hands in the cause of right. But at first Ulysses pretended that he had lost his reason. He borrowed a plow from a farmer and drove it up and down the seashore, sowing salt in the furrows that he made. Ulysses was pursuing this mad occupation when a messenger of Agamemnon came to demand his services in the army of the Greeks. The messenger could not believe his eyes, and to test Ulysses, he grasped the king's little son and laid him on the sand in the direct path of the plowshare. What would you do in this situation? He wants to prove that he's going crazy so that he doesn't have to go to war, but his son is being laid in the path to die. What would you do? Come on, what would you really do? Ulysses dropped the plow handles and lifted the baby Telemachus to his heart. To his game of madness, it was over. There was nothing he could do. He had to make sure his son was okay. He bade his kingdom and Penelope farewell and set out to join the heroes. And he was one of the bravest of them all, and doomed not to see his own land again for 20 years. There was also a hero, a wonder of strength, who was detained from war because of the very great love that his mother had for him. This was Achilles, who was destined to be the noblest hero of Greece in the contest with the Trojans. When he was a baby, Achilles' mother had taken him to the river Styx, and holding him by one little heel, had plunged him into the sacred waters. Ooh, do you guys remember that story? Because what happened? Do you like when she dipped him in the river Styx? This made him safe from any harm that would come to him, and his only flaw was his heel. That's where we get the term Achilles heel, because that's supposed to be your greatest weakness. It's your only flaw, and the only reason that happened was because she had to hold him by his foot, and so that was the only spot that didn't get dipped in the river Styx. So she sent him after that to be friends in a faraway kingdom in the dress of a girl, and he was brought up there among women so that he could not be called to arms. But they still found him. He was still discovered. So at this time, when the Greeks were polishing their shields and fastening on their swords for the advance of Troy, news of Achilles' cowardly hiding came to Ulysses. And Ulysses, he's being forced into war. So do you think he's going to take this lightly? He, who had overcome his own fear, could not bear to have any other hero fall victim to cowardice. So Ulysses disguised himself as a vendor of fine wares, scents and embroidered silks, carved ivory ornaments and jewels, and he went to the kingdom where Achilles, now a youth, sojourned in the disguise of a maiden. The women on the court seized with greatest delight in the fine fabrics and necklaces from Ulysses' store. But Achilles delved in the packet of goods until his eyes lighted upon a strange and beautifully wrought weapon. Ooh, so even though he was disguised as a woman and raised among women, the weapons were what he wanted. The weapons. Okay. So these alone pleased him, and they destined Achilles to be found out. He was found out. So he went with Ulysses to join the army. Ulysses knew somehow news of Achilles got back to people, even though he was dressed as a woman. So in the meantime, King Priam had welcomed the erring Paris and Helen. So great was the charm of her face that everyone was just beguiled by her. Everyone. So it was a sore trial to the heroes of Troy that this should have happened, for they were as bold and upright men in their way as the Greeks were, and had not deserved the shame that had come upon them. But they too were banded together to protect their king, and so they made all the needful preparations to meet the forces of the enemy when the Greeks should cross the sea. Since this was a great war that started because of jealousy of the gods, and the gods themselves took part in the struggle, Neptune carried the ships of the Greeks safely over the plains of Troy, where Ulysses accompanied King Menelaus into the city to demand the return of Helen. When King Priam refused, Venus endeavored to keep Helen in her power, and she enlisted Mars on the side of the Trojans. Juno favored the Greeks, as did also Minerva, the goddess of just warfare. And Apollo and Jupiter watched over the fate of those of the heroes whom they loved, no matter on which side they fought. So, with this, the Trojan War began. But for how it ended was a story of a strange horse made all out of wood. So we're eventually going to see how the Trojan War ends. I'll tell the story. Not today, though, because I wanted to go on this one because I really enjoyed it. Isn't it interesting how a war can be started over such small things? It all started because of jealousy and fighting that really didn't even make sense. But, Helen was really just a poor party in this one because she was encouraged by Venus and beguiled by her to fall in love with Paris when really she shouldn't have gone in that direction. It can be really sad. So I hope you enjoyed this story, and my little storybook that I created in Latin class in 2004. That was a very long time ago, but I'm old, so it's funny because that only came up because I found it in my anyone still have those? You know, there's things that you keep because you just enjoyed them so much from school days. But yeah, so I hope you enjoyed that story. Please take some time to like, subscribe, comment, whatever you want to do. But I'd like to hear from you guys because it helps keep up my motivation a little bit. So, thank you for listening, and I will see you